When I started this maybe 15 months ago, I had looked at a demo software that was pretty robust and it was pretty expensive, but it was relative to the size of the market that they were focusing on. And so I was like, well, I get it. That would be probably worth it to us if we could get a deal under our belt, but it was a lot of money to spend if you didn't. And so I was like, well, what can I do to kind of, help ourselves out that's kind of appropriately sized for us, if you will. And that's kind of how this all kind of came into play.
Hey everyone, Chris Lopez here, and today's podcast is all about building your deal funnel. So really interesting guest and topic where my guest today analyzed 90 multifamily properties, right? He built his funnel, wrote 10 LOIs, and he talks about what he did. So a very common problem investors have. So what I like about this, in addition to going through the funnel he built, he went out there and then building a piece of software to help him go out there and automate and help go through the process so he can do less sweat equity and using software, using AI to automate things. So it might be a cool piece of software for people to use. And the last thing I'll say on here is I know many investors out there are always looking for ways to bridge into entrepreneurship. And I think today's guest really highlights how he found a problem as an investor and then came up with a solution as an entrepreneur for his own investing issues, which can go out there and help other investors. So without further ado, I want to welcome Joe Bechtel to the podcast. Joel, how are you?
Great. Thanks, Chris, for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to jump into the podcast. I mean, obviously, like we've talked a lot. I know a lot of what we're talking about in the podcast today. So I think it's just a really, really cool story. But before I get into like the deal funnel and all that, just kind of walk us through briefly, like kind of who you are, what you do as a real estate investor, just your background.
Yeah, so see if I can summarize this for you. Like I grew up with my parents owning rental properties. I think my parents had like 40, 45 units back in the day at their peak. Dad on the side would develop land, subdivide it, sell it off, that kind of thing, or maybe get it to perk, for septic, that kind of thing. And so I was in my 20s and, Dad had said, do I want to buy any of his properties off of him? And at that time, I was like not really interested in buying those properties off my parents. So I kind of pursued the software realm, if you will, because that was just where my interests were at the time. So I had a software company for about 18 years. In 2014, I sold off most of it, and then I kind of pivoted and did some consulting roles and that kind of thing. Even had a CTO role in there. And meanwhile, in the background, I kind of, had this portfolio that I had started. My first property when I was 19, it was an assumable mortgage. It was a half a twin. My dad had found it, if you will, right? And so I kind of got my feet wet a little bit with that when I was younger. Had that for, maybe 5 years or whatever it was. So then I think there's maybe a period of 2 years where I didn't have any properties. And so I picked up another one, had to put my software business in part of that, if you will. And so anyway, where I'm going with this is I, in the background, just kind of as I saw a deal, I would either, kind of acquire it, add it to my portfolio. And so we got to about, 2018, did a fix and flip in there. And again, just kind of always had real estate in the background. And so it was maybe about a year and a half ago, I joined, mastermind group and, long story short, with some different connections that I come across, there were some guys that I wanted to potentially JV with, or maybe co-GP, and then you have them as co-GPs, if you will. And so the goal was to find these larger deals in certain markets that we identified, and kind of maybe combine our experiences and level up from where we were at. So that was kind of how this started. And it just through that process, we got these different leads from brokers and then lenders for debt quotes. And at the end of the day, when you had Google Drives and all this kind of stuff to try to keep things organized, it worked. But you were like, man, you could spend some time trying to gather all the information, underwrite it, and then go, this isn't even going to work. And there goes an hour or two of your day, right? So I kind of had this unfair advantage where I had the software background, and so I ended up, putting basically a framework around our process, if you will, to help us underwrite the deals faster. So that's kind of how it started. And I figured if someday I ever commercialize it, maybe I would do that. But nonetheless, it would give us a competitive advantage internally as a tool to help us expedite the underwriting process.
When did you start building the software?
Yeah, about July or August of 24. Sorry,
Okay.
24. Yeah. So about, at this point, about
So what,
what,
18 months
15.
ago?
Yeah. Hmm.
Okay.
Hmm.
All right. That's exciting, man. All right. So walk us through kind of just like your deal funnel, right? Kind of start from the high level. Hey, what was a buy box?
Hmm.
What type of how were you fishing? What type of deal flow were coming in, and what were kind of like the major steps of that funnel to to whittle things down?
So we identified the markets we were interested in, right? Which there was, basically Columbus, Ohio, right? We were looking at Nashville, Tennessee, and like Raleigh, North Carolina. Those general MSAs, if you will. So we had reached out to different brokers. Went to different websites. Had the classic, leads come to us or with like Crexy or whatever it was, LoopNet, even. But obviously, with building out these relationships with brokers, they started coming to us, right? So we had to kind of we knew what we were looking for. They kind of knew what we were looking for. So yeah, that was kind of where it started. And then a lot of times with these brokers, right? Sometimes you get T12, sometimes you get rent rolls, sometimes you get an income statement, sometimes you got an OM. I mean, you just never knew, right? It'd just be kind of a hodgepodge of information. Everybody had their own little format, and understandable, so that's kind of where I was like, well, you know what, I could probably extract this data, for using AI, right? And then try to, streamline the process. And that, AI can make mistakes, right? But it's also just on my end, I found, copying and pasting the Excel was kind of tedious also, right? So then of course you forget to update a cell in Excel that could be problematic too, right? So at the end of the day, AI is helpful, and I still kind of I still recommend people to, sanity check this information as it comes through. But yeah, it just at the end of the day, like I said, just expedites the whole process. So.
All right, so you got your markets, you got brokers sending you deals.
Mhm.
And I think you said you had what 90 some deals that you looked at. Like, what was at the first pass you would do manually as an investor, and then what we're able to automate with AI.
Yeah. So with the markets that we were looking at, we kind of knew some of the information as far as like, we identified those markets based off of population growth or, income growth, that kind of thing. So that was kind of a start, right? In getting that information from, about the area. Um, and one thing I forgot to add along the way here is when we get these different leads from these different brokers, they would be sent to one guy or me, or they'd forward it to me. So just be like this trail of a thread of forwards, if you will. And so I had set up a Gmail account specifically for these leads. And so I was like, if I can create this bucket, if you will, and forward these leads over to the bucket, then I can have the AI read that bucket because it's predominantly going to be, an actual broker lead as opposed to just like, checking my email account that could have anything in it, right? That kind of thing. So that was where the Gmail integration kind of came into play. And then of course, whatever on the software side, kind of build out like a market metrics tab, right? Where it can kind of go out and check for like properties in a flood zone or fair market rents, or census data, so different features we have inside the market metrics that kind of helped quickly identify, because a lot of them just like, well, quickly find out more information about the area where we were investing in. So and I kind of tied it into a lot of free APIs that were out there. So for instance, you have like grade schools, but they have like a paid API. So I'm like, wonder how we could kind of create our own, right? So I end up using the Department of Education APIs and that kind of stuff. So a lot of our stuff's kind of more proprietary as far as the, how it aggregates the data, if you will, right? But it's again using free API information that's out there and are legit sources like census.gov or that kind of thing.
So before I keep going on going down the funnel, like how do you minimize and safeguard against AI hallucination, right? Like I'm a big proponent of AI for business, for life, for helping me with investing as well. I mean, just a few days ago, I was doing a pretty simple spreadsheet build out where I would used to do it myself, and I was asking how I do, and this was not the first time I'd done it. So like I kind of knew the basic prompts, and I've done it. And I don't know if it was having a bad day, but like the stuff it was doing was just insane, and it was just a glorified bank account reconciliation. It was not hard, but it was just like okay, you just made up these numbers, right? Like how do you safeguard against that, especially when you're kind of trying to do some quick filter stuff?
Yeah, that's a great question. Because even to your point in our software, we have like a little disclaimer that says, verify these or double check these
Oh,
results.
yeah.
Because you just never know with AI, right? But I think at this point, partly because when I can say this, going back to that Gmail, if they attach a T12 or an OM or a rent roll, right? As long as they mark it as such, and they just can't attach a random file, and I try to figure out, the AI tries to figure out what type of file that is. So that kind of minimizes error there, right? Because if for instance, if it's an OM but it's not labeled as an OM, um, it won't read it at all. It won't even attach it. So, but even if, let's say, the broker does attach it as an OM and we pull it over into the lead, uh, at that point, it's just attached to the record. You'd have to hit the button in the lead to extract the data out of the OM. As far as the consistency, probably at this point, it's just because it's been on our end, it's been refined, so many times as far as, different, samples and different types of formats, different leads, and the consistency is uh kind of been honed in on, if you will, right? And then even like for instance, if you, here's an example, when I kind of created like a demo customer, if you will, so people could try out Deal Flow Pro. I had AI. I basically took some data we had from, I guess, a property, and had AI kind of de-identify it, right, and kind of throw together a T12, a rent roll, and an OM, and then when my software, the AI extracts data from each one of those, in the software, you can see like, hey, I want to use this value off the T12 or this value off the rent roll or this value off the OM. And you'll find that they're usually pretty close and, in range of each other as far as those results. Right. So, I would recommend probably, if you are going to select the source, just to double check the values in the actual sheet, just to make sure they match up with the software would have found too. Right.
Okay. All right. So walk us through, going back to the deal flow funnel.
Sure.
You had your three markets selected.
Mm-hmm.
You had inbound leads. You built in the AI, assist in the workflow on there.
Mm-hmm.
How'd you go from 90 to writing 10 LOIs? Like, what were the main, as an investor, kind of like the main criteria? And then as like the entrepreneur software guy, how did the software assist in that? So kind of two parts to that question.
So the okay. So what happens is in our software, you can do a current and a pro forma, right? Analysis. And as you know, like you could say, whatever, like there's a 5% vacancy. You're like, yeah, but I don't know about that area too much, or I have to do more homework, right? So you can change it, the variable, to like 7% vacancy, or maybe a higher down payment or a higher interest rate or different things. So you can kind of see what I would, kind of how I would see it is look at the current, maybe off of the T12, and maybe the performa based off of, okay, maybe after stabilize, we do some CapEx and improvements and that kind of stuff, what the rents could be. And then, down farther in the screen, you can kind of see your current return metrics, your cash on cash return, your IRR, and your equity multiple. And then you can see those same three metrics on the return metrics on the pro forma side. And then you have exit assumptions that you can set as far as, for the current and pro forma as well. So for instance, like, you want to hold it for a 5-year period, right? Because, maybe you want to hold it for 7 years, and that's going to affect your return metrics. So the thing I found was helpful is, sometimes you're like, okay, the number does not work as is off the broker's asking price, if you will, and the information that they're providing. But what would work, right? So you could maybe adjust the um, asking price, change it down by like 10%, right, and see if where your return metrics are going to come in at. So you can kind of quickly identify, like, I get where it's at. It's not going to work, but what kind of tweaks do I need to make it work? And so the way I found is, it was just kind of made it a lot faster to kind of analyze uh, where you need to be at with the numbers to make it profitable, right? So maybe in 10 minutes, you could kind of see if you wanted to throw in an LOI or not. And with the LOIs being non-binding, you could do more due diligence after that part.
Yeah.
After that.
So was that mostly playing around with like the offer price variable?
You could adjust, offer price, the down payment, the interest rate, the vacancy rate, the capex. There's a number of variables you can change.
Does
Just
the Deal Flow Pro software, like I'm just thinking out loud here, and sorry for
sure,
jumping around on you, Joel.
that's okay.
Like, hey, as these things come in, I think anyone that's looked at more than a handful of multifamily OMs knows brokers and the performers tend to be very optimistic.
Hmm, hmm.
Right. Hey, and again, it's their job to sell their property, right? It's our job to do due diligence. So that's the game. But it's like, you're at like 100% rent in this area, but then you're a zip code over. Like, does the software help to like pull out like I don't know, like an in Rentometer or another one of those tools where it can pull out like, hey, these are 2-1 bedrooms and a zip code. What's the 75th percentile of rent? Does it help to like fact check any of the data, or I should say the pro forma data?
Good question. So haven't tied it into like rent comps yet. I've thought about that. The closest I get to that is in that market metrics tab. You can see, you know, uh, fair market rents for that area, which
Okay.
is helpful. One other thing I'll say that I forgot to say is we talked about, just the vacancy rate and the down payment, different terms. One of the things that's kind of helpful is there's a OPEX ratio, operating expense ratio that shows up. And you might, to your point, be like, wow, 55%, that's just really poorly run, right? There might be some room to improve on this, or maybe there's not. It's just a bad property. Or conversely, the broker was very optimistic about it and it's coming in at a 20% OPEX. You're like, well, that's really low. So you can slide the OPEX ratio. There's a slider where you could change it like, well, let's say it's 35 or 40%. Where does that put my numbers? So maybe you haven't figured out exactly what you need to change, like your vacancy rate or your, income or whatever. But you know that if you can uh, hone in on that OPEX ratio at a certain percentage, that's what you need to get your return metrics. Then you can kind of reverse engineer what other variables you need to change to get to that OPEX ratio.
Okay, that makes sense. Um, All right, now kind of going down the deal funnel. I know you mentioned you have a good due diligence story on a St. Louis property.
Mhm.
Um, walk us through the DD on there, getting you as investor and the software angle as well.
Yeah, so that one, again, it was kind of helpful because we were in a relatively quick period of time able to determine if we wanted to put an LOI in on the property. And we did, and it was accepted. And that was where we're like, okay, great. Now we have to do some more homework on this property um, or this area because we weren't already, it wasn't actually one of our normal areas that we were looking at. We had looked at it because one of the guys that I kind of looking to JV with it, if you will, has some fix and flips going on in that market. And so he wasn't exactly sure in that particular, you know, block, if you will, or that particular area of that market. But it's one of those things like, well, it's worthwhile looking at. So, and it was one of those things where my son actually, outside of our software, kind of did some due diligence on that area and said, Dad, I think that's a pretty rough area, as far as like, the crime and that kind of thing. So you might want to reconsider it, that kind of thing. So it was on our end enough to kind of, what we did again, word deep dive in that area outside of our software. That's where we kind of realized like, okay, yeah, that was maybe why it was such a good deal because there was other factors that were contributing to maybe making that offering price on that property lower. So
Okay,
than it
that
was
makes
before. So
sense.
yeah.
And when you said in the software, like the market research, right? Are you talking like kind of like macro market research, right? Hey, St. Louis. Or are you talking more like sub market type research? More zip code level, or a little bit of both.
So in our software, like we do have it down to like income for that area, right? I guess it's worshipped by zip code. And then there's a spot where it actually does go down to the block level.
Hmm.
But again, that's just more so on the income side, right? That doesn't get involved with all the other components like crime or um, you know um, or maybe walkability on that block or whatever, that kind of thing, right? So um, yeah, I'm sorry. Did I answer your question?
Yeah,
Like,
you
yeah,
did.
okay. So
Um. Oh, go ahead.
oh yeah, that's so yeah. Just saying, like with uh, the there's always the due diligence piece that you need to do, right? Whether it be sanity checking the numbers that AI is extracting out of the OM, or the numbers you put in to, determine that was a worthwhile deal pursuing or not. But there's other pieces that you have to, still check as far as the area, that's an area you want to invest in because it's, you think it's not safe to invest in or whatever, right? That kind of thing. So the software here focuses mostly on the underwriting piece.
Okay, that makes
Yep.
sense.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so you wrote 10 LOIs, with the
Mm-hmm.
help of with the help of the software.
Mm-hmm.
Did any of the LOIs turn under contracts and then turn to closings?
They did not. Like going back to it, while it was kind of a bummer that you go through like all these 90 properties, if you will, to submit 10 LOIs to only get one accepted that you end up kind of passing that we passed on. On the flip side, I was like, well, that's okay because if we didn't have the software, would have a lot more time invested in this. That would have kind of you know. Whatever, kind of been a waste, I guess, if you will, right? But I also look at it as, yes, it might be a little bit of a time waste, but I feel like we were able to analyze a lot of deals in a lot faster than we would have had we not had the software. So,
No, that makes sense, and that's where I think like software, especially AI, and whatever form people use it, like it's it if you know what you're doing, it can just have, a 5 or 10x, whatever type of efficiency level on there and help, having to minimize, hey, bringing on an analyst or someone else to go out there and do just some of the grunt work, right? Because, hey, going out there, sifting, sorting deals, hey, 90 deals to get 10 LOIs and still get nothing closed. Like, that's kind of par for the course, right? Like that's kind of the way things go. So not good, not bad, just is what it is. And hats off to you, and kudos to you for you know just sticking to like, hey, you got to go through the volume to go out there and find like, hey, you got to sift through a lot of stuff to find the one asset that you like, right? So how much time do you think this saved you, either at like at a per deal analysis level, or overall, if you can just compare like pure man grunt hours, and then hey, what did it save you with the software AI assist?
yeah, I mean, generally speaking, I would say you took like an hour to process that. We got it down to like 10 or 15 minutes. That's kind of
So an
max.
hour or two down to 10 or 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Okay, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean that is what, a 80% plus type time
Mm-hmm,
savings.
mm-hmm.
Uh, yeah. Okay. So, wow, that's kudos to you for doing that. Now I want to actually, sorry, before I take the conversation into a left turn here. We're recording in 2026 right now. Are you still out there filtering, sorting, and hunting for multifamilies?
Yes. And by the way, I'll agree with you. Like you said, while it seems like a lot of deals to end up with nothing, so to speak. In this market, the way it's been the last year or two, it's not terribly uncommon for whether it be a disconnect between the sale price and the asking price by a seller, right, and what buyers were willing to pay, either, right. So I feel like I'm kind of in good company. Like it's just it's a numbers game, right? So it's probably not a bad ratio where we're at anyway right now. So I'm sorry, I forgot your question.
We was talking about just you went through those 90 deals, and then are you still
Oh, still
hunting in the
going.
same markets, and any changes, or is just more, hey, we got to put more at the top of the funnel, get more, more coming out the bottom?
Yeah. So with the current focus, we kind of actually shifted a little bit in our model, if you will, as far as what we're looking for. Like, let me whatever. Let's try to like word this. We might have to edit this a little bit, but yeah, the partly because I ended up having to spend some time uh, refining the software to allow it to be commercially used. It's kind of slowed down the uh, deals that we've had the time to. I should say had the time taking the focus off of worrying about, if you will, looking at the additional deals coming in, right? I'll say this, one market that we've been looking at, it seemed like, okay, maybe it's just, there seems to be a fair amount of inventory out there. So it's like, okay, maybe we'll hold back a little bit because it does seem to be a little bit saturated. And so there's another opportunity that kind of came into our, whatever, our thing about our plate of ideas, if you will, that we're kind of looking into. And without going into too much detail about that, it's not necessarily ground up construction, but it's kind of uh, whatever. It's still developing multifamily properties or that kind of thing, right? So it's just a little bit different. So I'm not sure, like, if I want to modify the software to kind of help us analyze those components because it's slightly different. But on the same token, yeah, it's one of those things where I feel like we're at that spot where we could do like 80-20 if we wanted to focus on this 20% new idea we have. It's just kind of slightly out of the ordinary, if you will, or we can still focus the other 80% going back to the ranch, if you will, going deeper, getting more of these leads from brokers and analyzing quicker. So now we have the software kind of stabilized and ready for commercial use. So.
Okay. That makes sense. All right. So again, this is where I want to take a left turn because, this is, I'm a big fan. Like, hey, I mix my investing goals and interests along with like, my business goals, right? I think there's just a huge like synergy stack on there. I've been preaching that for years. I constantly recommend to people. I also have people ask me all the time, hey, they want to, get into more of a real estate career or entrepreneurship path. So I'm curious here, like, are there any tips or pearls of wisdom you can kind of share for merging? Hey, here's my investor hat along with the entrepreneur hat, and just kind of speak to any words or wisdoms to people out there that want to follow in your footsteps with mixing the two.
Not sure where to go with this exactly. I'll say this: in my case, one of the reasons I had joined that one mastermind group is just because I felt like I always had this real estate stuff going on in the background, and I was always good with being entrepreneurial and putting frameworks around things. But it was kind of one of those things where I'm like, for this thing that's kind of been in my background, because I'm up to whatever. I'm at the spot right now. I have 20 doors right now, and I did sell some other whatever a few properties over the last year, and it's going back to this mastermind group, and I joined it a year and a half ago. It was more so like, I didn't. It's been good for me because I feel like it kind of gave me more of a framework. Like, what did we do last week? What are we doing this? What am I doing? What did I do last week? What do I do next week? Or plan to do next week? And what's my quarterly goal for this week, for this quarter? And so it kind of just, again, puts a little bit of a framework on it, and then a little bit of accountability, if you will, right? And then other people who uh, are in my pod, if you will, that or some small group, whatever you would call it, to help run ideas past, right? So I guess I feel like it was very helpful for me just to. I felt, yes, I know people who do what I do, but they're local investors, right? But it's kind of a lonely world out there, whatever it is you do, because like kids would have my kids would say their friends would say, what do your parents even do? And they're like, well, you really don't know, right? Because you can't put it into words really easily, right? And so anyway, I'm just saying that I find that with this mastermind group, there's a lot of other people who do what you do, maybe just in a totally different area, and not exactly what you do. It's a little bit different, but you can kind of learn from each other. So yeah, so I guess community is a big thing. I guess is a good way of answering your question. Just finding other people who are doing similar to what you're doing, if not what you're doing, right? And try to learn from them. So
I think that's great. Like the community, the mastermind, what everyone's doing. It's so important to like, help get ideas, help get motivation. Sometimes it's commiserate, right? Like we all know as an investor, and if you go the entrepreneur route, you get punched a lot more as an entrepreneur than you as an investor, and you had the highs and lows. Hey, some days you're top of the mountain, the next day you're like, what the heck am I doing? Like, right? Like I think it's very important aspect on there. One thing I'll add on there as well is I sometimes tell people like it's I think the last few years, maybe last decade now, like YouTube and social media, they really glorified entrepreneurship.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's a hard road, and the mistake I see people. I just had this conversation. I kind of want to reshare it with not just the audience. Is just like I see people leaping from their W-2 job too quickly,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Like because hey, you're an entrepreneur. You're I've had years where I've had negative income, right? And you have years you have great income, and it's it's financially hard, it's mentally hard. Or sometimes I see investors, they leave their W-2 and then they can't go out there and get a loan, right? They kind of like shoot themselves in the foot too. So like I definitely agree with Joel there on community, mastermind, plugging with people, but also really just have a frank look at your finances and your investing plans to make sure that, hey, you've got the financial runway. And for whatever reason, lenders love W-2 income. They don't really like self-employed income.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure that I would say you're playing it safely as well while you're swinging for the fences.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Joel, as we wrap up here, are there any questions I forgot to ask on like the deal funnel or parts of the software that we didn't get a chance to highlight?
So one thing I was thinking about here was, like we talked about the community, that kind of thing. It's probably one of the reasons you know, with the software, that I felt like while we built it out for ourselves as an internal tool and it gave us a competitive advantage. Like I said, in the back of my mind, I'm like, well, it could maybe make this into a commercial product. Not that I want to go back into the commercial world, the software world necessarily, but it was one of those things where I'm like, well, okay, if I can spend like maybe 10% of my time to, make this software, multi-tenant capable, which basically means,
Yep.
each customer has their own login, that kind of stuff, and can always see their deals, that kind of thing. Um, then, I'm helping out other people buy something that I built, right? That we've used and tested ourselves for, over a year, right? And I think that was, and, added in some of the features that have been helpful for us. And so that was where, going one step further with that is I now have the software has the ability to tie into Deal Machine to get off market leads, because we were getting them predominantly on market through brokers, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
through my mastermind, going full circle, through my mastermind group, the assistant coach said, "Hey, a lot of people in our mastermind group use Deal Machine. What do you if you connected to their software to pull over the leads?" I'm like, well, I don't know. Let's see how hard that would be, to do. And it wasn't, terribly difficult. And so the way I see it now is our software can do on market leads through brokers, that Gmail, account that you would set up, if you will. That's optional. And
Yep.
if you have a deal machine, you can connect your deal machine through the deal machine. Has an API, key that you can put into our software to connect to your account on deal machine. Then if you want to add in a lead manually in our software, you can. So I just think at the end of the day is, um, it's a system that's helped us, and from an underwriting standpoint. And so if I can make it available to other real estate investors, whether it be newbies, because I kind of have the software kind of targeted, if you will, for 1 to 50 unit properties. So if you're a smaller
Okay.
investor, that's fine. If you're a small PE firm, that's fine too. Because what happened is, I forgot to say this, when I started this maybe 15 months ago, I had looked at a demo software that was pretty robust, and it was pretty expensive, but it was relative to the size of the market that they were focusing on. And so I was like, well, I get it. That would be probably worth it to us if we could get a deal under our belt, but there's a lot of money to spend if you didn't. And so I was like, well, what can I do to kind of, help ourselves out, that's kind of appropriately sized for us, if you will. And that's kind of how this all kind of came into play. So
Cool. That makes sense, Joel. So where can people go out there and look at or go out there and try Deal Flow Pro?
yeah, so we have our website is dealflowpro.io, and we have a promo code on there. Actually, the promo code on there, if you put in Chris Lopez, that you came from watching this podcast, that'll extend your 7-day trial to 14 days trial, and so no credit card required. So you can kind of get your feet wet with the software and you know test it out and try before you buy, if you will. Right. So I know
Awesome.
if you want to email me, you can also email me at info@dealflowpro.io if you have any questions. So
Cool. Yeah, we'll include on the show notes as well. But I mean, pretty simple, right? Dealflowpro.io. And apparently, I guess my name is now a coupon code. All right. So that's cool. Appreciate you sharing that to investors, right? Because that's what I always gonna go out there and get more value. So
right.
Joel, big thank you for coming on the podcast, talk about your journey as an investor, both an entrepreneur. I think it's awesome. And good luck with getting the the multifamily deal in 2026, but really awesome luck, and keeps up to date on how the growth of Deal Flow Pro goes.
It sounds great. Well, thanks so much again for having me.
All right. Thanks, Joel. Thanks,
All right.
everyone. Bye bye.